let's do. Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Hani, and I'm the Education USA advisor in the Czech Republic. And today, my special guest is from Slovakia, actually. It's an English teaching assistant, Eli. Thank you for joining us, Eli. And we're going to go and introduce an individualized major and how is it to study an individualized major in the United States. Thank you, Eli, for joining us and for talking about this major.
Hi, thank you. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself as well. My name is Eli. I graduated from the University of Louisville, which is in Kentucky, in May 2022. I double majored, so I had a political science major and then an individualized major, which I'll talk about today, with minors and a whole bunch of stuff as well. Directly after graduating, I worked for an educational nonprofit that focused on civics education as well as student leadership. And then I will start Harvard Law School in this upcoming August in 2024. So I will be very excited to continue my education with that.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
Amazing. Okay.
So that's a bit about myself. I will jump right into the major, but before I get started, I will be talking about an individualized major. Before I define what that is, I am going to throw a massive disclaimer over the discussion of this, is that individualized majors are not at every university, so you don't have this opportunity everywhere. And they're also done differently pretty much every single university, even if they may have the same name. Two universities will have very different individualized major programs. They may even be called something else, which I will talk about. The freedom that you have, it can differ drastically as well. But that's my disclaimer up front, is that it can look super different, but this can also be a great opportunity. Another part of this disclaimer is that since it can be done differently, so many different places, there's not really a best school for it. So this is really just a note of, looking out for it at your university if you're attending one in the US, looking for this as an opportunity to potentially increase your freedom with your education. So that's my disclaimer, and then I will jump into the major itself. So what is an individualized major? Put simply, it is a interdisciplinary plan that brings a bunch of different maybe majors or minors or subject areas together into one cohesive field of study. And typically, universities will require you to have a specific career or specific idea for your life after college in order to do this. Typically, it needs to also be unique enough from other majors at the university for you to take it on. For example, if you just recreate a biology major, then they might want you to take biology instead of doing an individualized major if it's too similar. Individualized majors come in all different shapes and sizes, as mentioned, and they can also be called different things even within the same university. So my university called it an individualized major, but also liberal studies was the overarching field. But it can also be called specialized curriculum, interdisciplinary studies, and so many more names. Some have super specific names, some are very general. So if whatever university you're going to, you may have to look for the specific thing that is what I'm talking about. Moving on from there, I will talk about the individualized major as it is at the University of Louisville. Most will operate in some similar way to this, and knowing about the University of Louisville's individualized major will at least help you understand what it can actually be or what it could look like at your university. So the idea of the individualized major, as mentioned, it's a personalized plan. You're coming together with some advisors to create your own field of study. So the first step at the University of Louisville is to actually meet with the liberal studies advisor. So this is usually a staff or a faculty member that is essentially in charge of everyone within the individualized major. And they will become your best friend. At least for me, they will become very close to you because they are literally helping you craft an entirely new field of study. During this meeting, you're really going to be talking about your interests, what you want to do with this individualized major, what classes you might want to take, what disciplines you might want to put together. And after this kind of first meeting, they will start to help you put together a plan.
Mhm.
So this plan at my university, you had to put forward a proposal and have it tentatively approved. For me, this proposal essentially included what job I would be focusing on, because my university required you to have a career in mind, as well as what concentrations I wanted to go into the major.
Mhm.
Then, after your proposal is tentatively approved at my university, you work even further with the advisor to design a very specific course of study. So, for U of L, you had to have at least three concentrations, so at least three different subject matters that came together.
Mhm.
And at least one of these for us had to be a full minor. So you had to get the full minor. For me, I did minors in all of these things, which is why I had so many there at the beginning. But you have to have at least three concentrations. And this is, I would say, three concentrations is pretty common for most individualized majors that I have seen.
Mhm.
Uh, Once you design the specific course of study, and this will again vary from university to university, but once you create this sort of study, you'll start taking your classes and you might make minor modifications.
Mhm.
What this means is that for me at the University of Louisville, we had essentially every single course planned out for around 3 years of my college career in order to make sure that I could finish this major. So obviously, not every class is offered every single semester, and since we're throwing so many things together, we need to have a proper plan in place. So we had everything planned out for around 3 years, knowing that we might have to move things around. So those minor modifications are really, let's say, a class isn't offered when we think it's going to be, or a class comes up that is super interesting that would work within this major. Then you can kind of make those adjustments on the fly as departments release their class schedule. One example I'll give of this is that a seminar opened up within my honors college that worked really, really well with my major.
Mhm.
Um, and what ended up happening was I asked my advisor, hey, could I sub this class in for this other class that you want me to take? And that is kind of like a minor modification that we made.
That's
Uh,
really
as
amazing.
you're
So
taking,
let me get one thing straight. So
yes.
you studied political science as your one major, and then you wanted another major, but nothing really suited your needs. So you created your own major that was approved, and you put in classes that you thought were, works the best towards your future career.
Yes, exactly.
Oh.
I'll talk about this a little bit later too, but my ideal career during undergraduate and still now is to do international law and specific focus on human rights. And so my political science degree really covered the international side of things because that's what it was focused on. But I didn't think that it covered the human rights or the civil rights side of things as much as I wanted, which is why I created a major called human rights, and I'll mention more specifics a little bit later. But so political science covered international. This major was able to cover human rights, and then together set me up really well for that career. So yes, exactly.
And so when you created it and kind of put together all the courses so it made it into a major, did did they kind of leave it at the University of Louisville for future students to be able to major in this, or does it come and go with you?
So I would say it comes and goes with the person. However, the individualized major kind of like department and the advisor, they keep track of every program that's ever happened in there,
Mhm.
just in case someone does come along and is like, "Hey, I'd be interested in this. Do you have something?" So
Mhm.
my university, for example, did not have a journalism major, and journalism is very popular to study in the US. So, journalism is one kind of individualized major that has been done a lot of times. And so, they have that historical record. So, if somebody else comes in and wants to do that, they definitely can. So, if somebody else comes into U of L and wants to do human rights as a major and they come to this program, then very well the work that I did could be reused, but maybe tweaked a little bit to
Yeah.
match that person a little bit more.
That's so amazing how flexible the school is. That's really lovely. Thank you, Eli.
Yes. No worries. Thank you. Right. So it's very flexible, making these minor modifications.
Mhm.
Then for U of L at least, we had to do a senior capstone. So that is probably that's expected of most people, depending on the university ways. But U of L didn't have that requirement, but for the individualized major, we did. And then we finish off, we submit a final proposal and essentially have it approved to be graduated. So this just means that you have to make sure you have all your credits in line, that you followed all the steps correctly, you took the classes you said you were going to take, and that it is distinct enough from majors for it not to be too big of an issue.
So what's a senior capstone?
Yeah, sorry. So a senior capstone is typically some sort of final project that you take on during your final year of university.
Mhm.
So at U of L, we had a few different options. You could
Mhm.
do an experiential one, which means you had like an internship or
Mhm.
something in the community that you actually did work as your
Mhm.
senior capstone, or that can be like a thesis or like a research paper, a massive one that you have to defend in front of a committee. Not as strong as like a PhD thesis, but those are the different options. I'll talk about mine. Mine was more experiential, but yeah, those are some of the various opportunities you can have.
Really cool. Thank you.
Cool. Um, right. So with this flexibility, we've talked a lot about what an individualized major is, the steps to do it. With this flexibility, at many universities, they will typically require something of you before you take this on, because they don't. A lot of universities see this as a really great opportunity, but know that people can take advantage of it if they really just want to make something easier, maybe. So there's a few different reasons why these qualifications or requirements exist.
Mhm.
But this was one of the reasons that I put that disclaimer at the beginning. Different universities are going to have different qualifications. And
Mhm.
typically, you have to be already an admitted student to even start looking into this or taking it on.
Mhm.
So the first thing is that you need a decently high college GPA.
Mhm.
So at U of L, this meant you had to have, I believe ours was a 3.0. So before you were accepted to the program, up until that point, you would need a 3.0 GPA. Your proposal also needs a strong purpose. So I mentioned how some universities require you to have a job in mind already. At
Mhm.
U of L, that was your strong purpose. You had to have a very specific kind of career and
Mhm.
reason why this was taking on.
Mhm.
I've already explained mine a little bit. I wanted to do international human rights law. I thought I had the international down. Thought I needed a bit more on the civil rights and human rights side of things.
Mhm.
So that was my strong purpose.
Mhm.
Some colleges require you to be part of their honors college to take on this program, and U of L is an example of that. They gave exceptions, but for the most part, you had to be part of the honors college.
Mhm.
And to quickly explain honors college, there are some universities where if you are an advanced student, before you are admitted, you can apply to the honors college, and it essentially is a uh, slightly more advanced, like I guess, course of study at the university, or at
Mhm.
least that's what it's supposed to be. I would say the differences between your college experience of having being a part of the honors college and being part of or not being part of it are class sizes. That's the biggest difference. And
Mhm.
then also access to classes. So at U of L, we got to sign up to classes earlier. We had options for smaller classes sometimes, and we had a little bit more access to those kind of things.
Mhm.
Some of the requirements is that you needed an advisor that you kind of met with every semester. So this is really just to update and make sure you keep on track. If a class didn't get offered, you can chat with your advisor about switching it out. And the meeting each semester with a faculty or staff advisor kind of goes back to what I was mentioning of those minor modifications.
Mhm.
And then we've already briefly talked about the capstone project. Many colleges require you to do that as a part of this.
Mhm.
So these qualifications do change college to college. I know of some programs where you only get to submit your proposal one time, and if you don't get accepted, you can't take on the major. I know other colleges that have less stringent requirements than U of L, so you'll really have to do the research when you're in your university.
And so when did you decide to apply for this individualized major? Was it in your freshman year or later on?
Yeah, so I had my first meeting with the advisor during my freshman year.
Uh-huh.
So I actually started off with a different major when I was in freshman year, and I had been toying with the idea of switching it up. So as part of that, I went to meet with this advisor so she could, advise me on whether or not this would be a good fit. And then the actual like official start of it though was my sophomore year. I can't remember if you actually had to wait. There's a chance at U of L you had to wait until your sophomore year,
Mhm.
anyways, to do an individualized major. and some universities have that requirement as well.
Mhm.
But I can't remember exactly. So it officially started for me my sophomore year.
Cool. Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. So my experience with this major in particular at U of L. So I've talked a lot about the actual process of getting it set up, as well as the qualifications and requirements. But my experience kind of goes beyond just the setting up side of things. So as mentioned, my professional aspiration is international human rights lawyer. I've
Mm-hmm.
talked about that, and that was really the driving force behind having a human rights kind of individualized major.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my proposal, as mentioned as well, I wanted to supplement my political science degree, which was in international relations, that really focused on civil and human rights. And also because I really thought that political science could give me some of the law aspect side of things, but maybe not the methodology of putting these things into practice, because law without it being applied is just a bunch of words. So having that application was really important to me. And then the concentrations that I chose for my three kind of minors that could come together, I had social change, which was a minor at my college, sociology, which you could have major or minor, and then race and gender studies, which was just a minor. But race and gender studies was interesting because it was a minor that was made up of classes from two different majors,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I took that as one of the concentrations instead of having four concentrations, which would have been too much.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So some of the highlights, I'm not going to be able to go into every single class or every single experience I had with this major, because, since it was made up of three minors, they could be their own kind of field of study presentations, but I'll give you some highlights. So first thing were my internships. I mentioned that my senior capstone was a experiential one. And so these internships, the one I actually had for the capstone is the first one on this list, this one, the United States Department of State, the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. But all three of these things all three of these internships kind of came together to
Mm-hmm.
help with the capstone in some way. Specifically for this internship, I was, as mentioned, part of the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. I was working very specifically on human rights policy at the Department of State in the US. The year was part of kind of like the COVID lockdown side of things. So I wasn't in Washington, D.C. So unfortunately, I cannot share too many pictures. But the work that I was doing was directly involved in ensuring that human rights is maintained throughout our, work with other countries.
Yeah.
I can't get into too many specifics beyond that, but it was very, very rewarding. I got to talk about it in my senior capstone, where I developed a report over what I was doing, and essentially like took what I had learned from this internship and put it into it was kind of like a mini thesis that took what I learned and like gave recommendations about how to continue to apply that in other fields as well.
Mm-hmm.
So my other two internships that really I got to do through this, the first was at a law firm. So I mentioned international human rights. As a lawyer, that's what I really want to do. So finding an internship that focused on law was very important as part of that. So Lambda Legal is a civil rights law firm in New York. Again, COVID, so I was remote, but I was doing part of the work in their fundraising department. So as part of this major, right, they want you to get a lot of different experiences in any way that you can. So I was doing not necessarily law work, but I was able to gather a lot of law knowledge while also, making an impact and working for this nonprofit. And then finally, Kentucky Refugee Ministries was a local organization that I had already had a very strong partnership with since my freshman year. And so I decided to incorporate them a little bit more because international law, specifically international refugee law, is a very thing that is very impactful in a lot of different communities in the U.S., especially Louisville, which is where my college was. And so that was kind of a continuous internship that I did throughout my time there.
Mm-hmm.
So then some highlights of some classes that were super interesting as part of this major. So as mentioned, we throw a bunch of different minors together, which means there's a lot of different options for you to have some amazing classes. So the first one, international law, that was part of my political science degree, but my university let you slightly double count things depending on how it worked. So since the purpose behind my major was to do international law, this seminar in my political science department worked really, really well.
Mhm,
And this was just a very general overview of the body of international law that I'll be delving into eventually.
mhm,
Then the other four were very specific to my major. So, environmental justice, looking at how climate change and the environment and laws around the environment can actually impact communities and impact people. So, again, bringing in that law, bringing in that human rights and civil rights side of things. US social justice movements did a very deep dive into not all of them, but a significant number of social justice movements in the US, but it was through a historical lens.
mhm,
So this kind of goes back to my purpose of finding more of a methodological approach, right? That application of the law. And I was able to see how these social justice movements were able to do that outside of a law context as well.
mhm,
Then two more very interesting classes: Faces of Global Poverty. There's a lot of work at the international level, especially at supranational organizations, is done to combat poverty. And so I thought this would be a very interesting thing, a very interesting perspective to throw in there as part of like a general understanding of civil rights around the world, right? Because got a lot of information on that for the U.S. But if I wanted a truly international approach, I would have needed to take this class as well. And it was really able to do that. And then finally, racism and sexism. It sounds like a very, very broad class, and it was, but that was one of the seminal classes for the race and gender minor. And that one really focused, even though the title doesn't show it, it focused a lot on law and a lot on kind of the interaction between law and social justice movements as well. So these were some of my favorite classes, and I tried to incorporate like all my different disciplines into talking about them. But you can see how, once you have your purpose, once you have your major, and once you have it designed, everything kind of fits into place.
mhm,
And if I just had chosen maybe one of these things, right? If I just did sociology, if I just did political science, or if I just did, social change, I
mhm,
would not have had as well-rounded or as much of the content that really will help me moving forward.
mhm. Well, this is very impressive, I have to say. Like, even like I feel like, ooh, this should have been like this seems very difficult and like reading heavy, and really you have to be prepared for every class. So like kudos to you, really. Yeah.
Yeah, well, definitely a lot of reading, but I feel like most colleges in the US, unless you're doing like a STEM major, is going to have a lot of reading
Okay,
associated with it for
fair
sure.
enough.
So graduation, I would, um, finish off talking about like moving on from your major, right, being done. But the great thing about the individualized major at most universities is since you need a very direct purpose in mind to do it and to follow through with it, is that whatever you set out to do to begin with is your plan after graduation. So for me, individualized major, I really wanted human rights. I'm going to use human rights in my career moving forward. My purpose was international law. I'm going to use this whole major in that. If your purpose though is maybe like I mentioned, journalism was a very big one at my university because it isn't like a typical major for my university. If you want to be a journalist, that was your original purpose. You do an individualized major, you're going to go into journalism and find those kind of jobs, right?
Mhm,
So this major does kind of front load a lot of decisions. You need to kind of know where you're headed. You
mhm,
need to know exactly what concentrations would help you get there.
mhm,
But once you do that front loaded work, the ending is very, very easy to kind of track where you're going to go.
mhm.
Um, so that is really my summary of my experience.
Uh-huh.
Um, Again, just to throw back, this can be different at every single university, or you might go to a university that has it exactly like U of L has it. But really, like, this is a great major for anyone who is very driven and who knows exactly what they want to do, but doesn't think that, another major really fits it exactly, right? And so, yeah, that is what I have.
That's
Thank
amazing, and I really appreciate it. And you guys who are watching, please see if you even enroll at a university that probably, you thought that you would like to study the major, like a different major, and then you realize that this is not the best fit. If that school has an advisor, please get in touch. Maybe they'll have an individualized major for you and they'll be happy to go through the journey. So it's not that you have to like switch schools or anything. There are options for you. So if you have any questions about Eli's journey, about, Louisville in Kentucky, maybe you're applying, maybe it's on your college list, please get in touch with me through advisor@fulbright.cz or through our social media, and I'm happy to connect you with Eli. He is from Slovakia, so if you are watching us from Slovakia, I'm sure that you can connect with him as well through Education USA. So Eli, thank you so much for introducing this unique opportunity that the US offer. And you guys, there is another opportunity for you to study in the US. So thank you so much. Bye.